Rain splattered against the window pane in erratic bursts, like the sky was trying to scratch its way inside. The air in Arin Solen's attic bedroom smelled of old wood, dust, and graphite. The ceiling sloped sharply above, and the single hanging bulb flickered like a tired firefly. Shadows stretched long across the cluttered floor, cast by stacks of books, scattered sketch pads, and half-finished art projects. Posters of forgotten dreams curled at the corners, their colours faded with time. A mug of cold tea sat abandoned on the windowsill, its contents mirroring the colour of the stormy clouds outside. Arin sat cross-legged on the floor, their back against an old trunk. A sketchbook lay open on their lap, pencil poised above a blank page. Their fingertips were smudged with grey, and faint streaks of charcoal marked their arms and the knees of their jeans. But the page remained untouched. Since Mom died, the spark that once burned in their art had faded to ash, and now each blank canvas felt like a reminder of everything left unsaid. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and a streak of lightning lit up the room, revealing for a moment the dust dancing in the air like restless spirits. The storm outside matched the restless unease in Arin's chest, unspoken grief, questions with no answers, and a silence in the house that felt heavier than words. They stood and wandered the room, their eyes scanning shelves, drawers, forgotten corners. In a dusty storage bin beneath a moth-eaten quilt embroidered with constellations, Arin uncovered a leather-bound sketchbook, unlike any they remembered. It was thick, weathered, and had a sun and moon clasp that clicked softly when touched. The leather felt warm, strangely alive beneath their fingers, and it smelled faintly of lavender and something older, earthy, metallic, like petrichor on ancient stone. Curious, Arin sat cross-legged once more and opened it. Most pages were blank, though the parchment shimmered faintly in the light, as if holding back secrets. One page bore a half-formed door, its lines hesitant and incomplete, drawn in the same hand Arin recognized from childhood, but didn't remember creating. Compelled by instinct, they picked up their pencil and traced over the lines. As they did, the graphite pulsed faintly beneath the touch, as though the paper were breathing. Outside, thunder cracked like a splitting tree, and lightning illuminated the attic in stark white. Then, the wind exploded inward. The attic windows flew open with a howl, scattering papers and pencils. The pages of the sketchbook flipped on their own. The drawn door on the page flung wide open. From it poured a blinding light, liquid silver, shifting and alive, that spilled into the room, casting shadows that danced across the walls. Arin's scream was caught in their throat. They reached up instinctively, shielding their eyes, but the light surged forward, engulfing them entirely. Then, silence. The attic, the storm, the world as they knew it, vanished, and Arin was gone. Arin awoke to stillness. The biting scent of storm wind and attic dust had been replaced by a sweet, earthy fragrance, damp moss, blooming nightshade, and something like memory soaked in rain. They opened their eyes slowly, blinking away the haze. The sky above was not the familiar grey of their home. It was vast and violet, streaked with ribbons of teal light that pulsed gently like the breath of a sleeping giant. Trees arched overhead, massive ancient things with translucent leaves that chimed when touched by wind. Each leaf shimmered like glass, capturing fragments of sound and casting them in glittering bursts as they fluttered down. Arin sat up slowly, brushing a dozen of them off their shoulders. As they fell, they released faint whispers. One murmured a lullaby. Another echoed a child's laughter. A third sighed a name they almost remembered. "Where am I?" Arin whispered aloud. Their voice seemed to awaken the woods. Bioluminescent fungi lit in constellations beneath the underbrush. The air rippled slightly, responding to the tremble in their breath. A small clearing surrounded them, a circle of polished stone with spiraling patterns carved deep into its surface. Vines curled around the edges like delicate script. Every direction looked both inviting and foreboding. The trees seemed to lean inward when Arin focused too long. Paths that appeared straight would shift if ignored. Nothing was still. Nothing was certain. A glimmer of movement caught Arin's attention. A figure stood at the edge of the clearing, veiled in a silvery shawl that floated around them, untouched by gravity. They had no discernible face, but a soft glow pulsed where eyes might be. "You're late," the figure said. The voice was layered, like wind speaking through a flute. It was neither male nor female, young nor old. It was familiar. "Who are you?" Arin asked, backing slightly. "A question for a question," the figure replied. "But first, where do you believe you are?" Arin swallowed. "I don't know. It feels like a dream." "Perhaps it is," said the figure, stepping forward. "Or perhaps it is a place older than dreaming. You've entered the Unseen Vale. It is shaped by the unseen parts of yourself." Arin stared at them. "Why am I here?" "Because you drew the door, and because something inside you asked to be found." "I didn't mean to come. I just followed the line," the figure interrupted gently. "That's how all true journeys begin." They extended a hand. "You may call me the Weaver. I do not give answers, but I do guide those ready to ask the right questions." Hesitant, but drawn to the surreal warmth in the figure's presence, Arin took the offered hand. The moment their fingers touched, the world shifted again. The trees bent backward, revealing a floating path made of starlight threads. "Your path has begun, Arin Solen," the Weaver said. "But to leave this place, you must find what you never lost." And with that, the Weaver vanished. Arin stood alone in the forest of falling echoes, with the whispering leaves all around, the violet sky above, and a journey waiting ahead. They took their first step. The path of starlight threads shimmered beneath Arin's feet, each step casting ripples through the air like pebbles in water. Around them, the forest of falling echoes gradually faded into a veil of mist, trees dissolving into translucent silhouettes, as if memory itself was being left behind. Eventually, the path unraveled into a new space, silent and still. A vast courtyard stretched before Arin, enclosed by towering walls of obsidian glass. The ground was paved with mirrored tiles, some cracked, others pristine, all reflecting not only Arin's face, but flickers of moments that did not belong to the present. A birthday candle flickering out, the last glance of their mother in a hospital bed, a slamming door, a hollow smile. At the far end of the courtyard stood a tall archway, within which floated a shrine of levitating stone. A faint hum filled the air, and as Arin stepped closer, the atmosphere grew heavier, not with physical weight, but with memory. A single step forward, and the voice returned, not the Weaver's, but something deeper, softer, echoing from within. "To return, you must remember. To heal, you must confront." Arin blinked. Before them now stood a reflection, not a mirror image, but a living echo. It wore their face, their clothes, but its eyes were sharp with grief, and its posture curled with resentment. It felt older, though unchanged, darker. "You left me," it said. Arin froze. "I stayed here in the moments you buried. I screamed in that hospital room while you picked up your pencil and tried to forget." "I didn't forget," Arin whispered. "I couldn't." The reflection stepped forward. Its voice cracked. "You stopped talking to Dad. You stopped drawing. You tried to disappear into silence." Arin clenched their fists. "I was trying to survive." "By pretending she never existed?" The mirrored world darkened slightly, the obsidian walls flickering with scenes, flickering memories of Arin turning away from their father at the funeral, shoving sketchbooks under their bed, sitting in the attic night after night, drawing but never finishing. "I loved her," Arin said, voice trembling. "Then why are you so afraid to feel it?" The floor cracked beneath their feet, spiderwebbing with energy. The reflection split into shards, 1,000 pieces of Arin's own face suspended in the air, each one showing a different moment of pain, love, loss, denial. "You don't move forward by forgetting," the voice intoned. "You move forward by remembering with grace." In the center of the courtyard, the shrine pulsed. Upon its surface lay a stone tablet, etched with an incomplete drawing. Arin and their mother side by side, unfinished. Her smile was half-formed, her hands undefined. Tears welled in Arin's eyes. They stepped forward and knelt, drawing from instinct rather than skill. They picked up the stone stylus, lying beside the tablet. Every motion was effortful, like dragging emotion through clay. But slowly, surely, the lines formed. Her smile appeared, soft, tired, loving. Her hands resting gently on Arin's shoulders. When it was done, the reflection whispered, "You see her now. Not as pain, as love." The shards of mirror light swirled and reformed, not into the same angry image, but into something new. A quiet reflection of Arin, whole, watching with understanding instead of accusation. It nodded once. The shrine pulsed. A beam of light descended from the violet sky above, dissolving the obsidian walls. Warmth spread through the mirrored floor as the trial courtyard faded, replaced by the return of the forest's edge. Arin stood taller now. Their chest still ached, but it no longer felt like it was caving inward. The ache lived alongside the warmth of memory. The weaver appeared again, perched upon a low branch woven with stars. "The first truth is the hardest to face. You did well." "I don't feel victorious," Arin said. "Growth often feels like breaking," the weaver replied, "until you realize you are only shedding what no longer served you." They gestured to the path ahead, which now led through a corridor of trees whose leaves whispered not in sorrow, but in song. "You are not whole yet, Arin Solen, but you are no longer lost." And with the scent of rain and lavender in the air, Arin stepped forward once more. The path of starlight dissolved behind Arin with every step, as if the forest were discouraging second thoughts. Ahead, the trees twisted inward, limbs woven together in archways that grew darker the deeper Arin went. The violet sky faded into hues of deep crimson, and the wind no longer carried lullabies. It whispered warnings. The forest here had changed. No longer were the leaves glass-like and luminous. These trees were skeletal, bark gnarled and black as burnt paper, with veins of red light pulsing beneath their surfaces like distant heartbeats. The air grew thick with the scent of rust and forgotten promises. Above, stars blinked erratically, some falling in slow motion like tears across the horizon. Arin felt it before they saw it, a strange sensation, like a tug behind their sternum. A wrongness, something watching. "You've done well," came a smooth, melodic voice. It slithered into the clearing like a thread of smoke. Arin turned quickly. Seated on a twisted branch above, reclining as though in their own parlor, was a figure cloaked in midnight silk. Nyx. Their hair was a storm of ink and starlight, eyes sharp as crescent moons. They smiled, not with kindness, but with the satisfaction of knowing secrets others did not. "Who are you?" Arin asked, instinctively stepping back. "I could ask you the same, but I already know. Arin Solen, artist, mourner, wanderer, seeker. I've been watching." Their voice, impossibly smooth, seemed to bypass Arin's ears and settle directly into their thoughts. "Are you one of the gatekeepers?" Arin asked. "Hardly," Nyx said with a scoff. "They make you walk the long path, Cry your tears, bleed your regrets, hug your inner child. Tiresome. Me? They dropped gracefully to the ground, landing in a crouch that made the earth sigh. I offer an alternative. Arin's brow furrowed. A shortcut. Of sorts, Nick said, circling slowly. You've already suffered. You've faced grief. Why keep flaying yourself with more trials? There are faster ways back to your world. They raised a hand, and a ripple formed in the air beside them, a rift like liquid glass. Through it, Arin glimpsed a vision of home, their attic room, golden with morning light, the sketchbook resting on the floor, the storm gone. A second chance. Arin took a half step toward it, heart racing. It's real, Nix whispered. One step and you're free. But the Weaver said, Ah yes, the Weaver, Nix interrupted with an exaggerated yawn. So fond of riddles and cryptic smiles. They want you to suffer. Me? I just want you to heal. Take the easy way. You've earned that much. Then came a rustle at Arin's side. Lumi had appeared, small, glowing faintly, eyes wide and uncertain. They looked between Arin and Nix, then at the rift. No, Lumi said softly. Not that way. Nix frowned. Ah, the echo of innocence. You're still carrying it around. Adorable, but unnecessary. Arin hesitated. Why shouldn't I go back? Isn't that the goal? Nick stepped closer. Listen to your heart. It's tired. It wants rest. Let the past go, Arin. The rift pulsed brighter, but so did Lumi. The small creature stepped forward, placing their tiny hand on Arin's. That's not rest, Lumi whispered. That's forgetting. That's vanishing. Arin looked again through the rift and noticed, for the first time, something wrong. The sketchbook was closed, sealed with dark thread. The light in the attic flickered unnaturally, and their reflection in the window was faceless. A trap. It's not real, Arin said, stepping back. Nix's smile vanished. You would choose pain over peace. I choose truth, Arin said, even if it hurts. Nix's form shuddered, shadow leaking from their limbs. So be it. With a scream that cracked the air, Nix lunged, but Lumi threw up their arms, radiating a soft golden light. The impact blasted outward, tossing Nix back and shattering the false rift like brittle ice. Nix hissed, retreating into shadow, glaring as they dissolved into smoke. You'll regret this, their voice echoed as it faded. Silence returned, but the air was charged, heavy with lingering fear. Lumi collapsed to their knees, dimmed but intact. Arin rushed to them, scooping the small creature up, tears pricking their eyes. You saved me, Arin said. Lumi nestled into their arms. You chose the right path. That saved us both. The trees began to shift again, color returning to the leaves, crimson bleeding back to violet. A new path unfurled ahead, this one lined with memory stones glowing gently with images Arin couldn't yet make out. The trial was not over, but something in Arin had changed. They had faced temptation, they had made a choice, and they were not alone. The path of starlight stretched onward, dissolving behind each step as if discouraging retreat. Arin followed it for what felt like hours. Time bent strangely in the veil. Sometimes the light dimmed to twilight. Sometimes the sky shimmered with golden dawn. With every breath, the landscape whispered memories not their own. Laughter echoing from unseen places. A lullaby carried on the wind. A deep sob that faded into rustling leaves. Lumi, their small, luminous companion, padded silently beside them. They had barely spoken since Nix's vanishing, but Arin felt the bond between them had deepened. Lumi's hand occasionally brushed Arin's, as if offering silent reassurance, or perhaps seeking it. Eventually, the starlit path led them to a new clearing, one unlike any Arin had seen before, A structure stood at its center, towering, silent, reverent. The memory temple. It was built into the side of a hill that sloped upward like a giant's shoulder, half hidden beneath overgrown moss and weeping vines. Columns of white stone, etched with shifting runes, supported a domed roof that shimmered like a soap bubble. Translucent, rainbow slicked, and impossibly delicate. Water trickled from somewhere unseen, running in thin silver streams across the temple steps and pooling into a wide mirror lake at its base. As Arin approached, they saw that the water reflected not the sky above, but something deeper. Glimpses of past moments flickered across the surface like film reels. A child's hand gripping a pencil, a mother's smile framed by golden kitchen light, raindrops racing down a glass window. "My memories," Arin whispered. Lumi nodded. "Some, others you've forgotten, or hidden." Together they crossed the water on stepping stones shaped like puzzle pieces. With each step, Arin heard a faint whisper, like a breath against their ear, fragments of words spoken long ago. They entered the temple in silence. Inside, the air was hushed and heavy, like the world itself was holding its breath. The dome overhead rippled with faint, moving light. Memories drifting lazily like jellyfish in a deep sea. The floor was made of polished obsidian, perfectly reflective, creating the illusion that Arin walked upon stars. Along the walls, alcoves flickered to life, each containing a glowing memory stone. Some were as small as pebbles, others the size of a heart. They pulsed softly when Arin neared, responding to their presence like embers reawakening. The weaver's voice echoed from nowhere and everywhere. "To move forward, you must look back. What you carry, you must face. What you fear, you must feel." A gentle light spilled from the center of the chamber, drawing Arin toward it. There, atop a pedestal shaped like an open palm, hovered a particularly large memory stone. Unlike the others, this one flickered chaotically, storm-colored, laced with both warmth and shadow. As Arin reached toward it, their fingers trembling, Lumi placed a hand on their arm. "You don't have to do this alone." "I think I do," Arin whispered. "But thank you for being here." And they touched the stone. In an instant, the world shattered. The temple dissolved. The stars overhead blinked out. Arin fell, not physically, but inward, into memory. They landed in a familiar place, the living room of their childhood home. Warm light spilled from a reading lamp. Rain tapped the windows in the familiar rhythm of home. On the couch sat a younger Arin, maybe 10 years old, curled beside their mother. She was humming softly, sketching in a notebook. Arin sat beside her, mirroring her movements, small hands trying to draw the same lines. Tears blurred Arin's vision. The memory was so real. The warmth of the lamp, the smell of cinnamon and rain, the sound of her voice. "You're doing so well," her voice said, clear and soft. Little Arin giggled, frustrated. "It doesn't look right." "It doesn't have to," their mother replied. "Art doesn't always need to make sense. Sometimes it just needs to make you feel." The memory shimmered, then shifted. The light dimmed. The couch was empty, the room cold. Arin stood alone again, now a teenager, facing the hospital bed they remembered too well. Machines beeped softly. Their mother lay still, her skin pale, a sketchbook resting on the bedside table. Arin remembered this moment, the day they couldn't bring themselves to say goodbye. Guilt clenched their chest like a fist. They turned away. But the weaver's voice echoed again. "To leave, you must find what you never lost." "What didn't I lose?" Arin cried aloud, the memory twisting around them. "She's gone. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't draw for months. I failed her." But something in the air shifted. The memory stilled, and Arin heard their mother's voice again, gentle, and close. You never lost me, not the part that matters. I live in your lines, in the way you see the world. I'm not your art. I'm the reason you feel it. Arin dropped to their knees overwhelmed and wept, not with the sharp, stifled tears of denial, but with the open sobs of release. Grief flowed freely now, not trapped behind walls of fear. It hurt, but it also healed. Light began to pour into the memory. The hospital walls melted into the stars. The young Arin reappeared, hand in hand with their mother, both of them smiling. And then, everything dissolved in light. Arin awoke back in the temple, lying on the cold stone floor. Lumi was beside them, holding their hand tightly. I saw her, Arin whispered, not as I remembered her, as she truly was. Lumi smiled through tears of their own. Then the trial is past. The great doors of the temple swung open, revealing a new path, a bridge of light arching over a chasm, leading toward distant peaks wreathed in cloud. Arin stood slowly, sketchbook in hand. They looked back at the temple, then forward toward the unknown. They still didn't know how to return home, but now they knew why they had come, and that was enough to keep walking. The bridge of light curved like a brushstroke across the sky, suspended above a vast abyss. Beneath it, shadows churned like forgotten thoughts, too deep to name. Each step Arin took across the bridge left behind a glowing footprint that slowly faded into nothingness. Lumi walked beside them, quieter than usual, casting occasional glances over the edge, but saying nothing. The air grew colder, not with the chill of winter, but with the breath of memories long buried. The sky above turned pale, then misted, then grey. As they reached the far side, the path ended at the edge of a cliff. There, nestled between steep, jagged walls of stone, lay a towering structure carved directly into the mountainside. It shimmered with soft, turquoise light that pulsed from within, and from every crevice, water trickled like tears, pooling into shallow rivers that flowed in elegant spirals down the slope. A single word carved above the entrance glowed faintly in the language of shape. Reflection. The flooded gallery, Lumi whispered. This is where the veil shows you who you've been, and who you feared you'd become. The doorway yawned open at their approach, and the smell of waterlogged parchment, old ink, and rain-soaked memories greeted them. Inside, silence reigned. Arin stepped into a vast chamber that stretched wider than it should have fit inside the mountain. It was a hall of mirrors, though none were made of glass. Canvases floated mid-air, suspended on beams of liquid light. Some were blank. Others shimmered with moving images, sketches, charcoal works, watercolor storms that dripped and bled. Paintings rippled like reflections in disturbed water, and beneath it all, the floor was submerged in ankle-deep, crystal-clear water. Every step Arin took sent silent ripples through their reflection. Arin looked up. The ceiling was a dome of obsidian-black water suspended in air. It moved slowly, like a sky flipped upside down, containing constellations formed not of stars, but of forgotten moments. A child's grin, a door left open, a shattered picture frame. Why is everything moving? Arin asked quietly. Lumi paused. Because nothing we feel is ever still. They walked deeper into the gallery. With each step, the art around them shifted. A canvas to the left showed Arin as a small child, crying over a torn drawing. Another showed their mother crouched beside them, helping tape it back together. In another, they were older, staring out a window while lightning forked the sky, sketchbook closed in their lap. And then they came to a canvas surrounded by water, its frame cracked and frayed with age. The image rippled and stuttered. At first, it showed nothing but grey. Then it came into focus. Arin, age 14, the funeral, standing in the rain, not crying. People talking, hands on shoulders, words muffled like they were underwater. Then it shifted again. Arin sitting in their room weeks later, the sketchbook untouched on the desk. The room dark, their reflection in the window distorted, their eyes empty. "No one saw me disappear," Arin whispered. "I stopped making art. I stopped everything. But I was still there, just smaller." They reached toward the canvas. It cracked down the middle. Water from the floor surged upward in slow-motion spirals, wrapping around their arms like living ink. Symbols danced along their skin. The canvas peeled away and revealed something hidden behind it. A doorway. It shimmered, shifting shape until it resembled a door they once drew as a child. Arched, carved with moons and leaves. "What is this?" Arin asked. "A memory you buried so deep. Even the veil had to help you find it," Lumi said. Arin pushed it open. They stepped inside. The space was small, round. A single wooden stool stood in the center, surrounded by half-sketched drawings pinned to floating panes of glass. Childish versions of dreams, flying whales, glowing forests, stars with eyes. And in the center, their mother. Not alive, not a ghost, but a memory made of light and pencil lines, sitting quietly and drawing. She looked up, smiled. "You came back," she said. "I didn't know I left," Arin murmured. She stood, brushing graphite dust from her fingers. "You did, but that's what grief does. It folds us inward, protects us until we're strong enough to look out again." "I thought I had to let you go." She shook her head. "You only had to stop running from how much you loved me." Tears welled up again, so different from before. This time they weren't drowning, they were cleansing. Arin stepped forward. She opened her arms, and they embraced. The room filled with a soft golden glow. The water from the gallery flooded in, but this time, instead of drowning, it lifted Arin up. The memory faded. The door closed behind them. They stood again in the flooded gallery, soaked but whole. Lumi grinned. "You saw her." "I did," Arin said, voice trembling. "And I remembered that I'm still here. I'm still me." And for the first time since they arrived in the Vale, Arin opened their sketchbook on their own. They dipped their pencil in the water, and where it touched the page, ink flowed in vibrant color. They drew a window, not to escape, but to let the light in. The path that led away from the flooded gallery wound into a narrow corridor of obsidian stone, slick with mist. The light dimmed to a twilight hue, though no sun or moon was visible. The air had grown heavy, like the moment before thunder, a kind of silence that pressed in around Arin's skin, whispering warnings with every step. Lumi followed close behind, but slower now, hesitant. The warmth they carried from the gallery still lingered, like sunlight stored beneath Arin's ribs. But the path ahead exhaled a colder promise. "Something's wrong," Lumi said. "I know," Arin replied. "It feels like the air is watching us." At the corridor's end, the path opened suddenly, violently, into a shattered plain. It was a place torn between dream and nightmare. The ground was made of broken mirrors stitched together by threads of shadow, and each step sent up ghostly reflections of Arin's past selves, laughing, crying, angry, alone. The sky overhead was a bruised violet, fractured by streaks of jagged light that pulsed like heartbeats. And in the center stood a throne carved of obsidian and bone, polished to a glistening sheen. Draped lazily over it, with one leg slung over an armrest and a grin too sharp to be entirely human, was Nyx. They wore a coat of shimmering dusk, stitched from ravens' wings and unraveling shadows. Their eyes gleamed with starlight and mischief, and their voice, when they spoke, bent the air around it, sweet as honey, sharp as frost. "Well, well," the artist arrives. Arin slowed. Nix. At your service, Nix said with a mocking bow, slipping from the throne and landing lightly on the fractured ground without a sound. The dream walker, the grief bearer, the would-be magician. You've made quite the impression on the Vale. What do you want? Arin asked. I want what you want, Nix said. To go home. To stop hurting. To be free of this tangle of riddles and tears. They stepped closer, and the air around them shimmered like heat rising from asphalt. But unlike your charming weaver or your squeaky little conscience, they flicked a finger dismissively at Lumi, who growled, I don't think you need to suffer to get there. Arin's brow furrowed. What do you mean? Nix waved a hand. The sky split open above them, revealing a glowing doorway, the very same Arin had drawn in their attic that stormy night. Behind it, their father, sitting alone in the kitchen, staring at an untouched mug of tea. Their bedroom, unchanged. A beam of golden sunlight cutting across the sketchbook on their desk. Home. It's real, Nix said. No tricks, no illusions. All you have to do is walk through. No more trials, no more buried feelings. You've done enough. Arin stared at the door. Their heart ached with longing. Lumi stepped in front of them. Don't. It's not the real way out. Nix scoffed. And what is the real way, little lightbug? More tears. More self-flagellation in some haunted shrine of feelings. They turned to Arin again, voice like silk. Listen to me, Arin. You've been through so much. Let me give you the ending you deserve. You've earned rest, joy. Let go of all this messy emotion nonsense. Arin's breath trembled. It looks so real. It is real, Nix purred. The moment you choose it, it becomes truth. No one will question how you got there. You'll wake up, and this will be like a dream, faded, distant. Just a weird, beautiful detour you don't have to think about again. Arin took a step forward. Lumi's voice shook. Please, if you go now, you leave part of yourself behind. The part that needs healing. The part that cried and created and fought to understand. That part will stay here, alone. Nix's smile faltered, just for a flicker. They're wrong. That part of you doesn't need to be carried. It's what weighs you down. Arin stood still between them. The sky warped, the doorway pulsed brighter, and then they did something unexpected. They sat down, on the broken mirror floor, cross-legged, hands open on their knees. They closed their eyes. Silence fell. Even Nix stopped speaking. Then Arin whispered, If this is really what I want, I should be able to draw it. They pulled the sketchbook from their satchel, opened it to a fresh page, reached into the air where dreamlight always shimmered, and began to draw. But as they tried to sketch the door Nix had shown them, their lines trembled, blurred, unraveled. The graphite refused to take form. The paper curled at the corners, because it wasn't their door. Arin looked up. You're not offering me home. You're offering escape. Nix's eyes narrowed. Isn't that the same thing? No, Arin said, voice stronger now. Escape is running. I don't want to run. I want to understand, to remember her, and me. They turned the page and drew something new. A mirror. Cracked, yes, but held together with gold. Nix hissed. The false doorway shattered like glass, vanishing into the clouds. The shadows recoiled. The throne behind them splintered into ash. They gave Arin a long, furious look. You think this makes you stronger, they spat. There are worse trials ahead, deeper griefs. You've rejected comfort. Remember that. Then, like smoke fleeing sunlight, Nix vanished into the fractured air. Arin sat still for a long time. Lumi placed a tiny hand on theirs. You did it. No, Arin said softly. I just didn't run. They stood again, and the sky above them began to heal. The world shifted gently around Arin as they left the place where Nyx had vanished, like waking from a fever dream. The air grew lighter with every step, the bruised sky giving way to a soft blush of dawn, though no sun could be seen. Instead, a gentle radiance rose from the horizon like the glow behind a closed eyelid, warm, pulsing, alive. They crested a low ridge of silver grass, the blades whispering in a language Arin couldn't quite translate. Lumi stayed close, walking quietly for once, as though even they didn't wish to interrupt what lay ahead. Then, like a breath held and finally released, the world opened. Before them stretched a field that shimmered like starlight poured across the earth. It undulated with flowers that defied description, petals of opalescent silk, translucent leaves that refracted emotion like prisms. Some blossoms unfurled in slow motion as Arin passed, releasing faint motes of light that floated upward like dreams breaking free from sleep. "The dreamflower field," Lumi murmured. "It grows at the edge of the veil. Only those who have faced the truth of themselves can see it fully." "What are they?" Arin asked, reaching down to touch one of the blooms. "Memories," Lumi said, "but not just yours. The dreams of everyone who's ever passed through the veil. Joy, sorrow, fear, hope, all rooted here." Arin gently touched a blossom the color of pale sunrise. It opened wider beneath their fingers, and a vision shimmered in the air above it. A small boy reaching for his mother's hand as they watched lanterns float across a lake. The scent of cinnamon and wet leaves followed, fleeting but real. Each flower held a fragment of something once felt, once loved. They moved through the field in reverent silence, each step echoing like a footfall in sacred space. Some flowers pulsed with soft laughter, others hummed lullabies. Some sobbed quietly, their petals trembling in the wind. Then Arin saw something strange, an entire section of the field wilting, its blossoms curled inward, color fading. It felt like a scar. "What happened here?" Arin asked, kneeling. Lumi knelt too. A visitor once passed through and chose to forget. They left their grief here, but never returned to tend it. Memories untended can rot. Arin reached out instinctively and touched one of the wilted petals. It flickered, then pulsed gently beneath their hand. Color returned, faint and uncertain. "You can heal them," Lumi said in awe. "Maybe not heal," Arin replied, "but I can remember. I can witness." They pulled out their sketchbook. Using no reference but the pulse in their chest, they drew the flower exactly as it should be. Blooming, whole, surrounded by light. The image glowed on the page, and as it did, the flower at their feet stirred, uncurled, and stood tall once more. All around them, other wilted flowers responded. The field seemed to hold its breath. Then, slowly, light spread through the wounded patch like ink through water, and the air sang. "You're not just passing through the veil," Lumi whispered. "You're becoming part of it." Arin stood, heart thudding. "What does that mean?" "That maybe your journey doesn't end at the door you came through. Maybe you're here to carry something back, to remind your world what it forgot." Then the wind changed. It swept over the field, rippling the dream flowers, lifting them into a gentle dance. In its wake a path opened, marked not by stone or starlight, but by golden blooms that parted as Arin approached. At the end stood a familiar shape, a doorway, but not the one Nyx offered, nor the one from the attic. This one was alive with symbols, drawn in the language of shape, glowing with acceptance, healing, and choice. A door made not to escape but to return bearing truth. Arin approached it slowly. Lumi touched their sleeve. "This is the end of the veil. You can go through, or you can stay. Some do." Arin looked around. The field pulsed with beauty, but it was not theirs to keep. I need to go back, they said softly. I have things to say, to draw, to mend. Lumi nodded, though their eyes shimmered like dew. Then this is goodbye, Arin Solen, but not forever. You'll hear us in quiet dreams, in laughter you didn't expect, in the light between rain. Arin smiled. Thank you. They opened the door. Light rushed through, not blinding, not loud, but warm. It flowed around them like a memory remembered just in time. As they stepped through, the sketchbook glowed in their hands. And then they were home. The attic was quiet. No storm now. Just the hush of early morning filtering through the window, the light soft and golden, carrying the scent of dew and fresh beginnings. Dust motes drifted lazily in the sunbeams, like they had all the time in the world. Arin stood in the center of the room, dazed, not from dizziness, but from stillness. It was the same attic, the same sloped ceiling, the same frayed posters, the same cup of cold tea still sitting, abandoned, on the windowsill. But they had changed. They placed a hand on the floor to steady themselves, half expecting the boards to hum with veil magic or the walls to breathe. But the room remained still, ordinary. And yet, something had followed them. They could feel it inside. A quiet thrum in their chest, like a second heartbeat. Not a burden, not a wound. Just presence, memory, purpose. Lumi was gone, but the warmth they left lingered like a familiar song just out of reach. Arin smiled, faint and private. They sat cross-legged on the floor and opened their sketchbook. It was no longer a relic of dusty childhood, but a vessel alive with new pages. The drawing of the cracked mirror repaired with gold remained, glowing faintly. And there, on the last page, was the dreamflower field. Every bloom hand-drawn, alive with motion and light, as if the memory itself had etched itself into the paper. Arin picked up their pencil. They didn't pause this time. No hesitation, no fear of the blank page. They began to draw, slowly, deliberately. Not to impress, not to escape, but to remember. They drew Mom, not perfectly, not photographically, but honestly. Laughing, head tilted slightly, the way she looked when she was listening, really listening. The lines weren't stiff, they flowed. Arin's hand moved like the pencil had been waiting for this very moment. As the drawing took shape, their eyes welled up. But the tears didn't sting. They fell freely, like the rain outside the veil that had once scared them. Now they simply were. Downstairs, the house stirred. The clink of dishes, a kettle's low whistle, their father moving through the morning in silence. Arin hesitated at the top of the stairs, sketchbook in hand. Then they walked down. The kitchen was filled with the smell of toast and tea. Their father sat at the table, staring at the steam rising from his mug. He looked up, surprised. Morning. Arin hesitated, then slid the sketchbook onto the table between them. I want to show you something, they said. He opened it. First, silence. Then, a sharp breath, and the softest tremble in his fingers as he turned the page. Then another, and another. When he reached the portrait of Mom, his hand stopped. He didn't speak, but his shoulders shook, and Arin reached out, placing their hand over his. They sat there, across from each other, not saying much. But something between them, once shattered, began, very slowly, to stitch itself back together. Later, Arin returned to the attic. There were things to organize, pages to sort, but not to hide away this time. They stood by the window, watching the breeze stir the trees outside, and for just a moment, reflected faintly in the glass. They thought they saw Lumi, watching from a high branch, wings curled like a cloak, and far behind them, faint and echoing, the chiming of dreamflowers in bloom. The weeks that followed passed not in silence, but in slow rediscovery. At first, Arin expected the magic to fade, like a dream dissolving in daylight. But it never left. It simply changed form. It curled itself into everyday moments, the sound of pencil on paper, the rustle of trees outside their window, the way light fractured through glass to paint rainbows on the wall. The attic, once a tomb of memory, became a sanctuary again. They organized their art supplies, not compulsively, but lovingly. Each pencil, each brush, each scrap of charcoal found its place like a puzzle piece returning home. The sketchbook from the Vale remained on their desk, its sun and moon clasp occasionally warm beneath their fingertips. Some pages refused to be opened. Others shimmered when touched, still alive with the thrum of distant places. Arin didn't force them. They had learned that some stories asked to be listened to slowly. More often, they drew in a new book, one bound with their own hands, stitched with care. The first page bore a single phrase, scrawled in charcoal. To remember is to heal. They began sketching people again, not just imagined creatures or surreal landscapes, but classmates, neighbors, strangers on the bus. Not idealized, not posed, just as they were. Beautiful in their ordinariness. At school, things shifted too. People who once passed Arin by now lingered. Their art teacher, Ms. Holden, noticed the change almost immediately. "Your lines," she said, examining a charcoal portrait Arin had finished in one long sitting. "They breathe now." Arin had smiled quietly, unsure how to explain that they'd once spoken with a creature made of laughter and light. More than once, they caught themselves sketching dream flowers in the margins of notebooks, little blossoms of memory and hope. Sometimes, they left those pages behind for others to find. Sometimes, they watched as someone picked one up, stared, and smiled without knowing why. At home, the distance with Dad softened. They didn't speak about Mom often. But when they did, it wasn't wrapped in pain anymore. It was quieter, gentler, like tending a garden that had once gone wild. One evening, as the golden hour painted the attic in light, Arin sat by the window and flipped to the final page of the Vale sketchbook. It was blank, but unlike before, that emptiness didn't frighten them. They picked up their pencil and began to draw, not the dreamflower field, not the weaver, not even Lumi. They drew themselves, not idealized, not perfect, just Arin, sitting cross-legged in the attic, a sketchbook on their lap, and eyes that held both shadow and starlight. As they drew, the page shimmered faintly, and beneath their pencil, words began to surface, not written by their hand, but drawn from memory, like a whisper finally answered. "What was never lost was you." Arin smiled. The wind stirred outside, lifting a curl of paper. The house creaked like it was exhaling after a long sleep. Somewhere far beyond the world they knew, a leaf chimed gently as it fell. And in that quiet moment, surrounded by memory and possibility, Arin understood. The Unseen Vale had never been a place to escape to. It had been a mirror, a guide, a seed, and now it was growing in them,